Hello, Mayor Mike. We've got a cool crowd here. They're going to grill you later, but we'll get this. I just learned something so interesting, you know? I've always wanted to go up to a mayor. You know, Mike Rawlings used to be the CEO of Pizza Hut. So he used to make a lot of money. And I said, you know, so you go from, you know, I know this is a little weird and off topic, but I said, what do you make here as a mayor of Dallas? And he says, $60,000. I said, really? You went from like a $1 million plus salary to say, so why would anybody want your job? Why did you want this job?
I don't think the verb want is the right verb, okay? I don't think anybody should want to put themselves there. I don't know, I think people feel callings.
Right.
I think, I never served in the armed forces, never gave, you know, back to our country. This is kind of what someone does.
So you're the longest serving mayor in Dallas, and one of the challenges you've had, I've had the opportunity now to interview you several times, and we've talked about development, we've talked about housing and some of the divides, the historic cultural, racial divides, income divides in the city. And I'm interested in what you think you've done to fix those things so far.
Well, first of all, they're not fixed, okay? This is a long-term march that I think this city is on, from being a divided city to a united city. I do believe we're much more multicultural now. If you look at kind of, let's just take race, for instance. Race used to be, if we're a big kind of oblong Salvador Dali clock, if you will, in Dallas, okay, the top half used to be white, and everybody in the south half used to be either African American, Hispanic, small. That's really kind of grown now, and we're still predominantly white from the 10 to the 2 level of that clock. But everything else is very, very diverse. So we've made progress there. I think that one of the things that I'm a big believer in is making sure that these young kids have a pathway to get to the next level. I think tremendous progress in schools and what's going on there. Right. And then our our unemployment rate is the lowest in the state of Texas.
3.3%, I read.
Yeah, I mean, it's there, and you're starting to see salaries get up, but I think that's one of the places we need to work on.
So when we're talking about housing today, and I know that you've just signed off on a comprehensive housing plan for the city, 20,000, yeah, 20 policy. So policy is, you're like saying
very different
between policy and execution, I see. Yeah. You're leaving himself wiggle room. But 20,000 units in 3 years, you're only going to be here for 8 months and 10 days of those 3 years, because I know you're going to be out this next year. But that's when his expiration date is, by the way. But in looking at this plan on housing, what do you think, in terms of that, are the things that are not yet getting fixed, but you're hopeful about in the housing plan?
Well, I don't think we've executed that plan yet. I mean, it's a very, very thoughtful piece that has some good goals, some good metrics. We put together a piece of research that goes block by block about the value of what Dallas is all about. So we'll be able to track that to kind of see how those things improve. But we finally got programs in place to help folks that are being displaced, so we can help them buy their homes. We can help them repair their homes. We can incentivize folks the right way to put affordable housing in. We can put a stick in place that they're not going to get points if they don't kind of make sure they do some of the things. We need to make sure this city continues to be more integrated, not only racially, but really economically. I think we're going to be stronger.
Well, we've talked about that before, about both racial divides, but low income, poverty, homelessness.
Yeah.
And you told me, it was one of the interesting discussions we had in the past, that you had put together a kind of data profile of the city, and you were joining the ranks of data mayors, and you were going to have a dashboard, but your dashboard would be distinctive in the sense that it would have real estate levels and rates and values in South Dallas.
That's one of
and that you knew that if they were rising there, you were doing something right. So how is your thinking, you know, about some of the I mean, part of the challenge of policy is to help those people who are being left out, excluded, or having to kind of continue in a status quo poverty situation. How do you address those communities?
Well, I think neighborhood by neighborhood. I think one of the things that, these are wonderful discussions, by the way, but I think people look for, here are the 3 easy rules that you need to follow. And we're in a customized society and customized neighborhoods. So this piece of data helps us understand what is needed in different places. There are some places that really need infrastructure before housing comes in. There are some places that need market rate housing. There's some places that need to help individuals get ownership of their homes versus being a renter.
Right.
And now we can analyze each of those neighborhoods and put those things in place. You know, when I think of putting plans and policies in place, I always remember there are 2 types of laws in this world. There's God's laws, okay? And God's laws are kind of things that are going to happen because we're human beings and we're all motivated a certain way, whether government does anything or not. And then there's man's laws. And I think in creating man's laws, we've got to figure out how to channel God's laws towards our you know, ultimate objectives. And some of these God's laws are getting very complicated these days. I mean, the price of land is just ridiculous, okay? So even if we put a tremendous amount of money in from a city coffers into land acquisition, we couldn't accomplish this. You've got to figure out how to work the marketplace in the right way to accomplish those things. And that's a thoughtful balance that should be these plans need to be themes with tools versus, you know, exactly what we're going to do in every market.
You know, we were just talking off stage a minute ago about some of the levers you have, and I often wonder when we do something like on housing, whether we're in a silo or a bubble looking at this, and I'm always wondering if there's a bank shot or something on the side that we're not thinking about that would give us leverage over a more equitable housing, about creating mobility for folks. What are some of those bank shot ideas that you've had as mayor for moving the city up on housing and getting some of the mix right?
Well, you know, to me, the thought outside of housing, and to me, it's not a bank shot in the sense of it's a trick shot. It's so fundamental, but we don't think about it, is really education, okay? Look, people want to live in neighborhoods. And the core of neighborhoods used to be someone's church and someone's school. Now, we're much more mobile a society, so that doesn't happen so much in the faith-based world anymore. And jobs are different places. But people see a school. What does a real estate agent say to you? Boy, there are great schools here, honey. Yeah. You can send your kids there, okay? And if we focused more on education in this country, we would make it a more sustainable, more equitable place. We just say, well, that's kind of the educators' jobs. And so Dallas has been working on this now for really seriously for the last 7 years. And we are now the best performing from a growth standpoint school system in Texas. And I'll put us up against any urban school. DC's done a great job, okay? DC's done it, but I think we're starting to catch up to see the J-curve take place from a performance standpoint.
From a housing perspective, and I'm not sure this is in your purview, but we had a guy up here, Jeff Wilson, a great guy with a company called Casita, and he makes basically micro housing units that are very interesting. But in that innovative space in housing and trying to shake up a system that hasn't been shaken up for quite a while, is there anything that has come across your desk that you find promising in terms of dealing with different ways to look at housing, deploy housing?
Well, first of all, I agree with you on the innovation thing. I mean, it's very, very complicated now. All cities, by the way, not just Dallas, but every city is a very, very complicated thing. So yes, we have small housing. Yes, we have We just opened up an apartment complex that we turned over for previously homeless individuals that are 55 and up.
Right.
And I believe we could do a dozen of those across the city, and we see that. The key, though, those things are interesting, but I always say this to nonprofits, too. From a mayor's point of view, I want them scalable.
Right.
How do we scale that? And so one of the opportunities that we have is the amount of land that's available in southern Dallas. And that's one of the reasons I'm focused on it. Not only for marketplace housing, we've got about 2,500 new marketplace homes. And that's a bank shot too, you think, because schools and then homes, then how do you keep folks that are still there and make sure they've got the money to redo their homes in the right way? That's how you start to build this network.
You know, when I meet folks that are trying to sculpt the future and make investments right, and you see these debates in city councils and with mayors and community organizations, one of the critiques of the housing plan come from various proponents of the community housing development organizations, CHODOs. And I'm just interested in this question of whether they have a legitimate critique. My understanding, and it's a limited understanding, is their idea is to build homes in more impoverished neighborhoods, and you try to create a change in the DNA by doing that, versus, and the criticism of them is that you're basically densifying poverty, continuing to keep some of the patterns in place. I'm just interested in, and I presume that everyone in this largely is trying to solve certain problems, but do you need to have a kind of understanding of where they're coming from to make this right? Because I know some of the CHODO groups feel like they're being left out of the housing plan.
And I think, you know, I understand why they feel that, because they've been doing God's work for a long time, and they've been working on it. And some of those CHODOs have been very successful in kind of turning around micro neighborhoods, if you will, not large scale, but you know, in a multiple block area. And I think they've done a great job. But look, hey, Habitat for Humanity is one of the biggest CHODOs, okay? And so we know that the history there. I think what some people accuse them of kind of helping institutional racism continue because it's segregation, which I think is very unfair for them. They're just trying to improve their neighborhoods. And by the way, a lot of people want to stay in those neighborhoods. And we shouldn't say, you know, that that's a bad thing. The issue we have, and the issue that we're still trying to work out with our CHODOs, is we only have a certain amount of money. And we're trying to solve this 20,000 unit issue. Are we going to be more successful in areas that are ready for these housing versus the toughest of the tough? And where I think I philosophically disagree with a couple of them is, I've always learned momentum happens by building on success, not going to the toughest thing and solving that, because it just doesn't, the momentum doesn't happen as much. Now, what we have to do is figure out a way that CHODOs can be part of that effort, okay? And second, what do those CHODOs need to make those neighborhoods ready for the growth that is out there? And that's a real tricky dance. And as a friend of mine told me once, the world is not made up of only assholes and geniuses, okay? And I think, you know, it's not...
A lot of shades of assholes.
Yeah, exactly, and geniuses, okay? And you know, and in the housing market, that's the same thing.
Just one question, then I want to go to all of you. You've been mayor. Dallas has grown like crazy. So many, it's now on the map. I was talking to the former mayor of Oklahoma City. I'll tell you, a great book to get if you guys have is Mick Cornett's book on the rise of the mid-city and how they're growing like crazy and how they're creating, you know, very unique pathways to grow their city and change livability. So congratulations. But if you were to just take a slug at the other parts of the equation, we've had financiers here, we've had Fannie Mae, we've had various growth funds, we've had entrepreneurs. In a shadow way, we've had people that used to work at housing and urban development. Who are the villains in the story of getting the housing picture right? Who do you think is part, if you were to blame someone that's underperforming in that equation?
The assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the individuals, look, everybody plays their own role, but from my point of view, being mayor, what I care about is those individuals that really don't care for the long-term viability of something. They're kind of builders and flippers, okay? Because they're trying to do this thing with as little capital as possible. And I wouldn't call them a villain, but they're not helpful to the cause, okay? Now, they're not going to get that much city money from us or zoning issues, and that's where our stick will start to be out there. The other folks are for the absentee landlords, okay? We've got some apartment complexes that have historically been good apartment complexes that need a lot of capital put back into them, okay? And they're just taking the $1,000 checks someplace in Aspen or Boulder, I don't know where they are, and just, you know, just taking it and they're not reinvesting their money. And, or they're REITs or there's something, they're absentee landlords.
Right.
And so what I've found is to power through that, find out who these people are, okay? And not hold them accountable, let's not, but just sit down with them and say, look, what we're trying to do is this, this, and this, and this. This is
guide them back.
This is probably going to be good for your balance sheet long term. If I had to do this with Pizza Hut franchisees, okay? People that didn't invest back in their restaurants. And it's like, that's not good. And we need to kind of, the health of the brand is important. And that's what we do.
Well, thank you. Let me open up to all of you. Yes, I have a question right here. Yes. Tell us who you are.
Hi, Jerry Hawkins,
Hi,
Dallas
Jerry.
Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation. We all know about the redlining in the 1930s that the city of Dallas and through the federal government kind of created an underclass of poor communities who couldn't get equity in their homes.
Right.
We have a new housing policy, but it doesn't address some of these historical things that happen in the city of Dallas. What do you think the city's responsibility is in addressing some of these historical inequities that created a permanent underclass in the city of Dallas?
Terrific question.
Yeah, I think it's first of all, it's a go-forward plan. So it wasn't, the attempt was not to do what you're doing in Dallas, which I think is very important, making sure that we all understand from whence we came and kind of our background. I think what we're trying to do, for me, is really comes back to the notion of equity. And equity means money, capital equity, not equality equity, okay? It's how do we get folks and families that have lived in neighborhoods for a long time to be get their piece of the pie. We have too many what I call high-impact landlords that Dallas was at the very top of the country of being renters in single-family homes. Okay, so we had a lot of homes that were redlined, to your point.
Right.
And people and landlords back in, what was it, 86 or something, when the whole tax law changed, started buying up all this stuff and creating businesses. And I want to try to get the equity out of their hands, do it in a way that is fair for them, but get it back into the homeowners' hands. And then I think we start to deal with some of those deep economic issues that were there for decades.
Great. Right here?
This is Jay Taylor with Jux Designs. I guess in the next 9 months before you term out, what are some of your objectives?
8 months and 10 days.
8 months and 10 days. What are some of your objectives as far as it pertains to housing and the Grove South area that you want to really achieve?
Terrific question. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I've been working for the last 6 months on Pleasant Grove. I think Pleasant Grove in Southeast Dallas is one of the most underappreciated, underleveraged parts of our city. We think of southern Dallas as South Dallas proper, South Oak Cliff, but Southeast Dallas has got so much potential and so many great neighborhoods. So strategically focus on that. Second is we're going to be taking a vote in a couple of weeks on what happens in Fair Park, because we've got to privatize Fair Park, and I think that will help with some of the landowners around that. And then lastly, and I haven't, maybe I'm breaking some news here today, but we haven't gone public with this, but as you know, the Mayor's Task Force on Poverty worked very hard on trying to isolate what are the drivers of poverty. And I want to create a collaborative, we're creating a collaboration amongst all the jurisdictions in town to deal with childhood poverty. And at the front end of that is really got to be housing. And I appreciate long-term stuff, and I kind of plan for the long term, but we've got to have some actions in place for that, because that's where the heartbreak for me is, that we got too many young children growing up in poverty. Now, I think we do because the economy's been great and a lot of people moved here, but that doesn't matter in the history. It's like, what are we going to do about those kids right now, and kind of dealing with those housing issues. So those are two or three. And then just implementing this plan, okay? Not coming up with new stuff, but we've got a plan. And this plan has to do with politics, by the way, because we've got council members that will read that plan a certain way. And how we get this money put out, are we going to have one time a year everybody kind of goes to the feeding trough, or is it going to be, you know, in a more organized fashion? So that's kind of where I'm focused.
Thank you, great. Let me ask you just like one final question real quick. There's been a lot of talk about opportunity zones and the tax bill.
Huge.
This was a bipartisan thing. Cory Booker, Tim Scott were big into it. It was actually, the idea was launched at an event the Atlantic did a few years ago, and was part of the tax bill. Do you believe that giving this opportunity to rich people to slide off some taxes but invest in these distressed areas matters to a place like Dallas?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't have to believe it. I see it already. I see the opportunity zone funds that are being set up. I know those areas. People are already looking into how they invest in it. And these are rich people that want to make sure they participate in the growth of our city in a healthy fashion too.
Right.
So there's a dual benefit to them, okay? Not only do they have the tax benefit, but they can say, all right, I was able to solve this 20,000 affordable housing issue. So where there's a lot of, on that tax bill I wasn't a big fan of. As a mayor, I was a huge fan of that.
Well, I assume for the next 8 months and 10 days, you're going to work doggedly for the city of Dallas.
I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Mike Rawlings of Dallas, thank you so much.
Thank you.